And I discovered another completely different, very contrasting side of spirituality, which is very bright and very colourful and very dynamic and animated. And the spirit is really kind of called into the space in a very different way, instead of like very gently and subtly moving into the nuances of the spiritual dimension. It's more like kind of making things shake and feeling a connection with the elements and different kinds of colours and frequencies. So yeah, the album that we're talking about, 1,000 Petals, it kind of brings together these two worlds in a way.
1,000 petals opening into the light as the divine flower unfolds.
Hello family, I'm Txai Fernando from Nixi Music, and today I'm here with my dear brother Adrian Freedman. I would like to hear a little bit about this journey, how this album came to be, and the vision, the history behind it.
Yeah, so it's a special moment for me because this album brings together lots of special people that are singing and performing together with me. It's taken quite a few years to pull it all together. And also it brings together lots of different threads in my musical journey. Different musical styles, different instruments that I've been sort of exploring, and I suppose my earliest musical experiences were much more in the sort of classical field. I played trumpet, and I played piano, and I played violin, and I found myself in orchestras and bands. But I think as I got older, I found myself drawn much more to other kinds of settings where music is used for meditation or for healing or for sacred ceremonies, devotional practice. So not so much music on a stage, but music in a more intimate setting. And within that world of devotional, healing, meditation music, I have found myself really deeply drawn to lots of different sacred traditions from around the world, and learning different instruments and learning songs. And at the same time, my own creative journey is always unfolding. And so these songs on this album, they kind of represent a meeting of all these different strands and people that I've met along the way, and sort of coming together in this set of songs.
Yeah, from this background, starting with classical and jazz, trumpet, violin, you remember what was the first mantra you heard? How you entered into the mantra universe?
Well, this instrument that I have here, the Japanese shakuhachi flute, is the instrument that I've been most passionate about, I suppose. I've been playing this instrument for 35 years now. And when I discovered this instrument, I guess I was in my 20s, and I'd already played lots of other instruments at that point, but never really found what I felt was my instrument. I guess I was always looking. And when I heard somebody play this instrument, it has such a unique sound, it immediately kind of captured me. And it's quite a unique instrument, and it's not so easy to learn. And so I found myself actually wanting to go to Japan and find a shakuhachi master. And that's what happened. I went there initially just to kind of explore and see what was possible. But I stayed there for 8 years. And as a consequence, as well as learning the shakuhachi, I also became deeply immersed in other aspects of Japanese culture. And because I was living in Kyoto, which is the ancient capital of Japan and has literally hundreds of temples and temple gardens. So I just became drawn more into this aspect of Japanese culture, the spirituality and the Buddhist teachings. And the shakuhachi has quite a strong association with Buddhist teachings because it's known as an instrument of Zen. So there's a direct connection there. And although when I first heard the instrument, I didn't know anything about that. It was just the sound of the instrument that really kind of like captured my soul, really. and called me to learn it. I suppose as the years that I spent in Japan unfolded, I just got drawn more and more into the bigger picture, the context of this, the Buddhist teachings. And so within that, I became exposed to different kinds of Buddhist chants in temple ceremonies. And I guess the first chant that I really became aware of was Om Mani Padme Hum. And just these 6 syllables are considered to contain all the essence of the Buddha's teachings. So it has this really central role in a lot of Buddhist practices, chanting the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. And so when I first had the idea to set that mantra to music and find a way to be able to sing it in the kinds of ceremonies that I was taking part in at the time, I guess that was the sort of gateway through which the music of this album first began to flow and open up into the landscape that it became.
Amazing. Well, we're gonna talk more about the album, but once you mentioned this incredible, amazing instrument which you've been dedicating so much, could you show us a little bit the shakuhachi and maybe play a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to play you a short piece.
Oh, thank you so much. I'd love to hear. It's amazing the dynamic range and the sonic spectrum of this instrument, and also for me that love so much instruments and cultures, like how close to the silence you can get with this four holes.
Yeah.
Bamboo.
Well, it's just 4 holes on the front and 1 on the back.
One in the back.
But you learn to use 1/4 and 1/2 and 3/4 holes, and also different head movements. The angle you blow into the flute changes the pitch as well. So you end up being able to play a full chromatic scale like this. And so on. But then because you're playing all these different sort of finger positions, ultimately they all sort of join up into one continuum of sound like this. So that gives you literally the full frequency spectrum and then there's the different tone colours which come from the different kinds of breath that you use. So you can play a very clean tone like this. But then you can add more breath to the sound like this. And you're absolutely right as well what you say about the silence, because one of the things that became more and more clear to me as I was studying the shakuhachi. The shakuhachi comes from in a particular tradition which is called Sui-Zen, which means the Zen of breath. And so it has this direct connection through the breath with meditation practice. And although the music is very special and very sort of powerful and enchanting in itself, in some ways the purpose of the music is to lead to the silence that follows. And then it has this connection to other aspects of Japanese culture. They have this concept of what they call the ma, which is the space between things, which can be the space between words when you're having a conversation, where there's a meaning in the silence. Or it could be the space between the leaves on a tree, or the space between the flowers in a flower arrangement. It's used in Japanese architecture and Japanese gardening and tea ceremony. And it's this idea that the silence itself is kind of pregnant with meaning. And the things that surround the silence are in some ways gateways into that sort of deepening of silence. And when that's translated into a spiritual practice, then the music becomes a kind of pathway to some kind of inner stillness. At the same time, the music is able to encapsulate and express all the different emotions and the different aspects of the journey to arrive there. Because just to sort of click our fingers and be in perfect peace and stillness is not so easy. So the music becomes a kind of an accompaniment and a guide in a form of expression on that sort of meditative journey. And with regard to the songs on the album, they kind of come in from the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Japan playing the shakuhachi, everything was oriented towards stillness and refinement and balance and silence and the sort of subtleties of sound. But whilst I was living in Japan, in the middle of that period, I met some Brazilian musicians and singers from the Amazon forest who were traveling in Japan and singing songs as part of their own sacred rituals. And almost by accident, I went along to some ceremonies, some sacred ceremonies with these amazing people. And I discovered another completely different, very contrasting side of spirituality, which is very bright and very colourful and very dynamic and animated. And the spirit is really kind of called into the space in a very different way, instead of like very gently and subtly moving into the nuances of the spiritual dimension. It's more like kind of making things shake and feeling connection with the elements and different kinds of colours and frequencies. So yeah, the album that we're talking about, Thousand Petals, it kind of brings together these two worlds in a way, because the songs on the album, they have an origin in this kind of setting that I found myself in with the Brazilian musicians. That became a big part of my path as well, because that was 30 years ago I met them. And yet alongside that you have this Oriental, Japanese, Buddhist sort of spirituality, which is represented on the one hand with the flute, but then comes through the mantras and the chants and the other aspects of these Eastern spiritual lineages.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and even the name, as it says, Thousand Petals, of the same beautiful flower. Because, and then after, I guess it came so many other also influences and traditions, and I felt this beautifully in your album, and this new paradigm we're living, where so many encounters and meeting of cultures and alliances and the spirituality from many different traditions are sort of coming together. So I feel this is really weaved in a beautiful way through your album. And maybe we could talk about some of those mantras and a little bit of what is a bit of the story or the meaning behind. For instance, and also when you brought the lyrical content, also the text and the blending with those mantras. So for instance, the Gayatri mantra, I would love to listen a bit about your version in this album. Mm-hmm. And, there's a title,
the song is, a lot of the songs on the album, they have the name of the mantra, whether it's Vasudevaya mantra or Om Mani Padme Hum or the Heart Sutra. In this case, the Gayatri mantra. But then there's a kind of another part of the title which expresses something of the sort of lyrical content of the song. So in this case, the Gayatri song is called The Source of Love. Actually, each of these songs, they have their own quite unique little kind of memory of how the songs came into being. And this song actually, as the words of the lyrics say, go soft into the deep of the night. Do not rage against the dying of the light. For the stars will come and the moon will shine, and silver beings will guide you on your journey through the night. Yes, the stars will come, and in this darkness you will find your way to the source of love. So that's the first verse. Yes. And actually that song came to me in a very, very challenging moment. I found myself in a situation where I really didn't want to be there, but I couldn't leave. And I won't go into the details about what was going on in that moment. It's not really relevant anyway. But it was one of those situations where you really, really don't want to be there. You want to be somewhere very different, but you can't leave. And so I just dropped inside myself to see if I could find some kind of balance and some harmony inside myself with a rather chaotic situation all around. And even though there was other music and other sounds going on in the space at the time, I did manage to find a sort of thread of connection to some place of stillness in myself. And that's where I heard this voice saying to me, go soft into the deep of the night, do not rage against the dying of the light. And it's actually, what was stirring in my memory at that time was a poem by the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas, where the opening, I don't know if I can quote it exactly, but it's something like, it's a poem that he wrote when his own father was passing away. And I think his father was surrendered to the fact that he was dying, and his son Dylan Thomas wanted to kind of encourage him not to give up so easily. Don't go soft into the night. You should rage. He uses the word rage, which is kind of like rage is a very strong word. Yeah. Rage against the dying of the light. And the image that came to me was the exact opposite. Don't rage against the dying of the light. Go soft, surrender. And in that moment, I could sort of feel this idea of the veil between the invisible and visible worlds as something very fluid and soft and open, and some idea of a kind of source of life which sustains us in this life, but also is either side of us as we come in and out of this life. The source of life, or source of love, source of consciousness. And that seemed to connect with the Gayatri mantra, which is a very ancient mantra. It comes from an Indian scripture called the Rig Veda, which is more than 3,000 years old. It's one of the most ancient mantras. And the meaning is basically giving praise to the source of life, the source of light, source of creation. And the sense of giving praise is almost devotional, because there's so much passion which can be felt in that connection to that source. So there's a kind of softness which has a sort of emotional quality in the way that this sense of reverence to the source can be felt. And at the same time, there's something almost kind of epic in the grandeur of the nature of perceiving the creation, the source of all. And all of that can be just expressed in this simple mantra, which is then accompanied by the words of the songs, the lyric, which kind of decorates the mantra with voices and instruments.
When does it start to happen that the mantra and the lyrical, which was the first? Was the Om Mani Padme Hum?
Yeah, it was the Om Mani Padme Hum. Actually, what happened was, going back to when I met these Brazilian musicians and singers, so as I said, this is 30 years ago, and I was living in Japan, but they became friends of mine because I was so drawn into their orbit. The energy they had was so charismatic and captivating for me that it was almost as if when I went to Japan, living in England, and I was living in London in my 20s, I was part of the music scene in London. I was playing a lot of improvised avant-garde music and orchestral music and folk music, all kinds of things. I was always very thirsty for any kind of music I could find. And then when I went to Japan and I arrived there, it was as if some part of my soul had been waiting, it had been kind of dormant, this part that was very naturally at home in the context of the Zen temples and the Buddhist practices. And then when I met these Brazilian musicians, it was like some other part of my soul had been activated that wanted to be in the forest, wanted to be surrounded by nature, wanted to be dancing all night, wanted to be making very strong prayers. And so although I was living in Japan, I made a trip to Brazil to visit these people, and they became good friends. And I started traveling from Brazil to Japan and back over those years, and so I found myself more and more sitting in circle in the sacred healing rituals and the ceremonies that they have with their own music and their own medicines from the forest. And in that context, the music is very important, and all of the music is based on songs. And the songs carry a message which is connected to nature and connected to divine qualities, connected to guidance about different kinds of healings for individuals or for communities. And I was drawn to that world, and I started to learn many of these songs. And through that deep immersion in that other very contrasting culture, I began to receive my own songs. And then one day, many years later, after I already had received about 80 of my own songs within this setting of the Brazilian forest rituals, I remember sitting there and I was thinking about the Buddhist mantras and about my shakuhachi music and about my connection with this other side of spirituality and and wondering about these kind of very contrasting, almost parallel aspects of my world that didn't have any meeting point at all at that time. And I remember thinking to myself, we should chant a mantra in the ceremony here, which was the Brazilian Amazonian context. And so I sat there silently asking myself which mantra, and then Om Mani Padme Hum came to me. And then I realized I don't know a melody for this. And just chanting it, Om Mani Padme, that's one thing, but to turn it into a song. So I sat there quietly thinking of this mantra, and then I just heard a melody naturally arising in my mind's ear, and I reached out for my guitar, and this melody just kind of naturally came out at the moment. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme So that's what happened, and then I had a mantra song, was born in that moment, and that didn't turn into a song with any extra lyrics. It just remained the mantra, but that's on the album, and
is the seed of the album somehow.
Yeah, but actually, our dear friend Chandra Lacombe is singing with me on the album, and he's another Brazilian musician who has expanded very much into Oriental spirituality.
Absolutely, and one of the greatest making this bridge and messenger of the mantras in Brazil, really.
Yeah.
Yes, you have amazing people in this album. I mean, you are a bridge. I'm here thinking like you come from London and you go to Japan and you make a bridge of Brazil, and from that so much more calm. And you brought a lot of that spirit to your musical project. Could you talk a bit about some of these special guests and friends that you have in this album?
Yeah, actually I was thinking about that because the title of the album, 1,000 Petals, you mentioned it earlier. And I guess there's different ways in which, for myself, I interpret that title. The lotus flower is a symbol that occurs many times in Buddhist teachings, and not only Buddhist teachings but all throughout the Orient, in Indian, and Chinese, and other kinds of Tibetan spiritual teachings and images. And the lotus flower is a very powerful symbol on a transformational healing path because it grows in the deep, dark mud, in the cold, dark water of the lake, and then it grows up through the dark, cold water to rise to the sunlight where it opens into these beautiful petals without a single speck of mud on it, and just in the kind of perfect, glorious form. And so it has this symbolic value. And when I think of 1,000 petals, on one level I think of a lotus flower that has 1,000 petals, and they say in one way of thinking about the way energy moves through our body, you can talk about chakras, energy points, and the different chakra points in the body are often visualized as lotus flowers. And on the top of the head, on the crown of the head, we have a chakra point, and it's said that on the top of our head there's a 1,000-petaled lotus, which is there all the time. And I love the idea that it's there all the time, even when I'm brushing my teeth, and we just forget about it. And in a way, a lot of the teachings of the spiritual practices that I've become connected to, they're very much about self-remembering, or just remembering things that are obscured through conditioning or different reasons. And so practices that help us to kind of connect and remember different aspects of our being, to come more into alignment. The lotus flower is a beautiful symbol of that, just remembering always we have this 1,000-petaled blossom on the top of our head 24/7.
Yeah.
So that's one meaning of the title, 1,000 Petals. But then also, I think it also connects to this idea of all the different people involved on this project. There's 45 musicians and singers on this album from many different countries, and they're all people that I've met along the way. Some amazing singers. We have Ayla Schafer singing on 3 of the songs, and Deva Premal singing on the Heart Sutra, and we mentioned Chandra Lacombe singing on one of the songs, also Darpan, our friend from Australia, and Lua Maria and Charlotte Mabon, Susie Rowe, and an amazing Norwegian singer. We're here in Norway, in the forest here right now outside Oslo, and there's an amazing Norwegian singer, Helen Bertzler, who's also on the project.
Beautiful.
So yeah, and then there's lots of amazing musicians too. An Indian tabla player called Sanju Sahai, and a Brazilian percussionist, Antonio Arvind, and yourself, of course, playing beautiful viola caipira and percussion. Yeah, and then I have 2 bass players on the album. Misha and Mullov Abbado, who's an amazing double bass player. And he also did some beautiful string quartet arrangements on 2 of the songs. It's just so beautiful. I'm so grateful for him for writing those arrangements. And then also my friend Antonio Moscato from Italy, who's playing the bass on some of the tracks. And the electric bass that Antonio plays and the double bass that Misha plays, they have such a different quality. And so the songs in this way, they're able to explore different sort of musical landscapes. And then also here in Oslo, we have Renato, our Brazilian friend, who plays beautiful guitar on some of the tracks. And of course Nils, the other half of Nixi Music, who helped me out so much with the project because he'd done all the mixing on the tracks here in his studio. And so yeah, it's an amazing collaboration. And I think as well as the image of the 1,000 petals representing all these beautiful people with their beautiful musical offerings, it's also an expression of the different musical and spiritual cultural traditions which weave together through these songs. Because you have the energies of the forest rituals of Brazil, but also the candomblé and the orishas of the Afro-Brazilian spirituality. One of the songs is called Oshun Tara, and it brings together these 2 aspects of the female divine energy, the goddess, as expressed through the Buddhist deity of Tara and the Orisha of Oshun, of the clear waters. And I was recently, I just came from Turkey, where I was invited to take part in a Sufi gathering, and I was really touched by how the essential message or teaching at the heart of the Sufi tradition has so many connections with other traditions I've been exposed to. And so there's this sense of how, at the core of all these different spiritual lineages, there is just one simple message of unity and devotion and a calling for transformational healing, celebration, connection, reconnection with nature, and the search for peace that is always there in the human heart wherever we find ourselves. And so, yeah, the Thousand Petals seems to represent all these different aspects that come together in these songs. And as much as the music is a kind of beautiful musical expression of voices and instruments and mantras and melodies, I also feel it's a kind of a prayer. And my hope is that as this music goes out into the world, it can touch people in a way that some sort of healing frequency can be felt.
Thank you so much. It's truly beautiful. And I think to wrap it up, you mentioned a little bit about, but from all this amazing polarity you've been experiencing, from the silence to the intense sounds, from all this contrast, all this different religious tradition, this big diversity, we need really to. It seems that is a time that we have this common ground, and it seems that sometimes is what we need to find. What was this common ground that you found from all this that you've been experienced, this great diversity, and that is of course expressed in this album? What you feel that is in the essence like common ground from everything you've been experiencing?
That's a really good question. I think maybe the thing that I come back to is melody. When I first became drawn to music, as a very young child, I only ever was interested in music all my life. And it was much later I became interested in songs and lyrics and words. It was always the music, the musical language itself that appealed to me. And there's something about the world of music which seems to be a universal language that everybody can connect to. And of course you can add words and you can add lyrics in a particular language, and they can be translated and they can be sung, and the words can be said to have a meaning. And that's the same with these songs, whether it's the meaning of a mantra or it's the other lyrics. But there's something about music in and of itself, about the language of melody and rhythm and musical colours, which seems to really call people into this space of connection and unity, where something very simple can be felt and experienced and understood and shared. And I guess it's to do with beauty. It's to do with gratitude. The way that music provides, this kind of music at least, provides a kind of sanctuary where we can really appreciate and take time to appreciate something like beauty, which can easily be lost in a world where there's a lot of brutality and a lot of conflict. And to have music that really is in homage to beauty, and that's represented in just one single sound on the shakuhachi flute, or in a particular melody, the way that voices weave together. And I think when people come together and sing, something beautiful happens. And when people listen to their favourite music, something happens in the heart, some calling, some yearning is satisfied, even if only for a few moments. And so if I can offer myself to this world of music, to be part of a general movement of unity and healing and coming together, then I will feel that my time is well spent.
Definitely it is, man. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure, and looking forward for much more talks like that. But really a pleasure to have this chat, and thank you for sharing this beauty and inspiring so much, and making all these bridges.
Thank you, Txai. I'd also like to say thank you to you, because you're one half of the Nixi Music Project. And the Nixi Music Project has been supporting me for a number of years now to be able to make all of this happen. So I'm very grateful for that, and I also feel very inspired by all your other projects. all the other artists you're working with, and the events and the collaborations and the beautiful intentions that lie behind everything that you and Nils and the other people at Nixi Music are doing. And I feel honoured to be part of your project, and just want to say thank you.
Well, it's our project, like we say in Brazil, estamos juntos.
Estamos juntos. Obrigado.
Thank you. Obrigado.
Ranza Samo